And there we go. Pretty mellow music. Keeps me calm. Welcome everyone. I haven't participated in the chat room this evening. I apologize. I was pulling some last minute notes together. And I did answer Josh in the chat room regarding an article that he had sent to me about artificial blood that was made of silicon. So thank you for that, Josh. You always have some great research. My wife Kathleen is in the chat room this evening, and she's been carrying on with you while I've been putting things together here tonight. Finally kind of getting my room, my office if you will, together. I've got the camera pointed out the window a little bit. It's a nice evening. Finally have a table here, and I'm going to try to spruce things up a little and get organized. But we are here to talk about rather a more technical topic for the evening, electroceuticals. And this is a mixture, as you can well imagine, of two words, of electricity and pharmaceuticals. And it is actually moving away from chemical pharmaceutical agents to utilizing electricity to stimulate primarily the vagus nerve. No, it's not V-E-G-A-S, it is V-A-G-A-S, the largest nerve in the body that essentially runs from the 10th cranial nerve all the way down through the body. And we'll get into talking about the vagus nerve, but primarily electroceuticals is changing medicine, and it's really gained traction in 2014 in the displacement of typical pharmacological therapies and modalities. And lately it has come to our attention, as you know, a couple of live streams ago, because President Trump announced, and this actually goes back to the beginning of this month, but Monsef Slaoui, who was formerly the head of research at GlaxoSmithKline, a pharmaceutical company who has devoted multiple millions of dollars into electroceutical research. They're moving away from their traditional production of chemistry to electricity, to put it in simple terms. They understand the market potential. They also understand that this will render most pharmacological modalities obsolete. So they're staying ahead of the curve in terms of running their business, and we can understand that. But Monsef is now in charge of the warp speed operation, the warp drive operation, if you will, the warp speed operation to arrive at a singular vaccine. So we're going to look at his background just a little bit. We won't go into it in great depth, but it's interesting because at the present time he is no longer working for GSK. He's actually working for a venture capital firm, and he is, what is his title here? He is, capture this off my notes. He is now the one of the partners of a company by the name of Medix Capital, a venture capital firm. It is spelled M-E-D-I-C-X-I. Medixi, I guess you would call it, or Medixi Capital, venture capital firm. He has a PhD in microbiology and immunology from the Free University of Brussels and a couple of other degrees, but he's originally from Morocco, and he is now, having moved away from GSK, he is in venture capital. And their primary focus is on what GSK is involved in, as well as a few other companies we're going to mention here this evening. But they're heavily invested as a venture capital firm in the development of electroceuticals. Now, the punchline for the evening is that electroceuticals are very much at the heart, at the core of the mark of the beast. The microneedle array is part and parcel to the delivery of electrical signals, electrical impulses into the nervous system, the vagus nerve being the primary target because it's so large, but affecting the body in the manner of triggering immune responses using electricity. Well, the microneedle array delivers messenger RNA to modify the DNA of the host. It also is quite capable of delivering electrical impulses into the body. And we established that a couple of months ago, that internally it's delivering electrical signals that are received through 5G Wi-Fi. It also, because it is a sensor, has the ability to transmit back through the Wi-Fi system of 5G back to the blockchain system. This is the essence of the basic mechanical operation of the mark of the beast. We're adding another layer to that discussion when we talk about the ability electrically to induce the immune system by way of the nervous system, primarily targeting not only the vagus nerve, but the peripheral nervous system, which is the nervous system that reaches out to our extremities, to our organs, as the name implies, peripheral, throughout the body, not just the brain in terms of neurological, but throughout the peripheral nervous system, the central nervous system, and the vagus nerve, which is at the core of the central nervous system, and of course the brain stem and the brain itself. Now, you can race ahead in understanding and appreciating where we're headed with this, and that quite obviously is that through external stimuli, the body can be not only controlled in its motor movements, but its internal functions. The function of the brain is a given. The function of the major organs, and of course the muscular system. But when we couple things together, when we coalesce things together, and we see that Slaoui has been now appointed by the president as the head of this warp speed operation to develop a vaccine, this is accelerating not just the advent of the vaccine and its ability to be delivered, but the methodology by which it's to be delivered. We have made the case, Kathleen and myself, for several months now, that the microneedle array patch is the delivery system for the mark of the beast and the control mechanism of all humans. The injection by single-dose disposable syringes, which has been the discussion, it's been the red herring that we've talked about, the $308 million award by the U.S. government for the production of single-use syringe delivery system for the coming vaccine. The only thing unique about it is that it has an RFID chip, which is a GPS sensor attached to the syringe. It's not injected. It's not part of the injection. That's the only thing that's unique about it, but it's the red herring. It's to take people away from looking at the microneedle array. That's all it is. Because when you look at what we're talking about this evening in terms of electroceuticals, a syringe will not deliver an electroceutical device. A microneedle array functions as an electroceutical device. Now I want to share one graphic with you that looks very much like the microneedle array that we have talked about for so many months now. But this is actually what's known as the Utah array. These are microneedles, but this is attached to a black box that is then strapped to a person's head. And of course, this is in a therapeutic setting in a laboratory. But this was really the first beginning of the microneedle array system, was for the examination of the brain, stimulation of the brain, and to study the function and to map the neural pathways of the brain by way of a microneedle array called the Utah array. And it's still being used today to treat things like Parkinson's disease and motor disorders, both paralysis as well as uncontrolled motor movements. So the Utah array microneedle was then adapted to what we've been discussing about here, and that's the vaccine patch, the vaccine tattoo. So without going too far back and covering old ground, I just wanted to share that with you briefly. So again, electroceuticals primarily are to be delivered by a surface application by microneedle arrays. Okay? These are electrical stimuli. And they are, as I said, just to kind of reinforce, they are primarily for the purpose of stimulating the body's immune system to self-correct without the need for drugs. Now, it sounds great, but of course we can leap ahead and we can see the nefarious side to this, especially when we start talking about the mark of the beast. So interesting that Moussaoui is in the position that he's in. And he's in a financial position by which he can certainly benefit from being the head of this warp speed campaign for the development of a vaccine. Because no doubt his venture capital firm that he's a partner in, MEDIC, Medic Xi, that would be XI, Capital, out of Philadelphia, that they will reap huge financial benefit from his position and the directing towards the technologies that they have invested in, which is the electroceuticals. Okay? So as I said, Moussaoui is Moroccan by descent. He was the former, at GSK, director of bioelectronics. He was the director and chairman of bioelectronics development and vaccines. So he has a pretty good pedigree. If you look at all his degrees and you look at his track record, you would say, yeah, he's the right man for the job. The president's appointing the right guy. But when we look deeper into this, we realize that money is the deciding factor. That's what's driving, of course, the pharmaceutical companies that are trying to develop a drug-based therapy, primarily a DNA-based therapy vaccine, while at the same time, the electroceutical direction, which is a non-drug direction, is being pursued. And I'm sure that GSK is not the only one that's working on a electroceutical methodology to deliver a vaccine. Okay? All right, so we have a lot to cover this evening. I don't know if we're going to get to all of them, but I want to go to the scripture first, now that I've kind of presented my opening comments of where we're going. But we're going to move away from electroceuticals if we have time and go to the daily news as well. The events that we discussed last night, we still have some to talk about tonight as well if we have time. But Genesis 4:7 from the New American Standard Bible. If you do well, will not your countenance be lifted up? And if you do not do well, sin is crouching at the door, and its desires for you. But you must master it. That's our struggle, is against sin. And our call is to do well, to be Christ-like. It's a struggle. It's an hourly, it's a daily, it's a weekly struggle for all of us. To be as Christ-like, our countenance, to do well. Those are our marching orders. Be of good countenance. Be a good witness. Be a good teacher. Be a good person who is sharing the gospel, the good news of salvation through Jesus Christ. Because that's what all of this boils down to. We can talk about technology all we want, but this is purely a spiritual battle. It's manifesting physically because you can't separate the two. But this is purely spiritual because the end point is the Antichrist spirit. The mark of the beast, the blockchain system, the sentient world simulation, quantum computers, and quantum mechanics. Those are all the nuts and bolts. Those are all the systems of the coming Antichrist one world leader. So bear that in mind with some of the things that I'm going to share with you as far as the daily news. But let's get right into the electroporation material here. I said that it focuses on the vagus nerve. And I'd like to put a graphic up of that while I read just a short description of it. And again, it's not Las Vegas. This is the vagus nerve and its branches. And you can see where it moves off to and is in control of various systems within the body. It's the largest, it's a trunk. It's often referred to as a trunk nerve, okay? So the vagus nerve, you can see that through here in the various ganglia, if you will, the branching of it, okay? Alrighty, so I'll just read from Wikipedia, just very simple stuff. The vagus nerve, historically cited as the pneumogastric nerve, is the 10th cranial nerve, or CNX, and interferes with the parasympathetic control of the heart, interfaces. It controls the parasympathetic control of the heart, lungs, and digestive tract. The vagus nerves are normally referred to in the singular. It is the longest nerve in the autonomic nervous system in the human body. The ending part of the vagus nerve is known as the nucleus ambiguus. Now, the autonomic nervous system are those systems like your heart and your digestive system that function without any conscious influence. Certainly our breathing, especially when we're asleep, is functioning through the autonomic system. But we can, unlike the heart and the digestive tract, we can stop our breathing, obviously. So that's a semi-atomic autonomic system, if you will. But the autonomic nervous system, those things that function on their own without our real conscious awareness, is what the vagus nerve is primarily connected to. And this is where the focus has been with the Electroceuticals is to introduce electrical impulses into the vagus nerve, which then of course distributes throughout the body, introduce those signals in order to trigger immune responses. Okay? Here's a picture, a diagram, if you will, of what is known as a cuff that is surrounding a bundle of nerves. And it's this sheath, this cuff as it's known, that actually provides and delivers the electrical impulses into the nerve bundles. And that's the mechanics. That's the mechanics of this bioelectric. You'll hear people refer to electroceuticals as bioelectronics or bioelectronics as electroceuticals. The words are interchangeable. Easier probably to just think of bioelectronics. Again, since about 2014, this has really begun to gain some traction. Electroceuticals themselves used to describe biologically implanted electronic devices that are made to alter the way the human body acts or reacts using electrical stimulation. Here on the right-hand side, what they're showing you is a typical pacemaker that would be slipped in with a minor incision made in the skin over the heart, not the heart itself, but just the overlying external skin, and then slipped under the skin is a pacemaker and then a few sutures, and that's the end of it. And it delivers electrical impulses to the muscles of the heart in order to maintain the proper heartbeat, depending on whether it's an intrinsic or it's on demand. Okay? So these have been around for a long time, but it's a good example of an electroceutical that is controlling through electrical impulses functions within the body. Okay? Okay. So we'll try to keep it fairly, introductory here and not get too deep in the weeds. It isn't necessary to do that. But just understand that electroceuticals are involved with the microneedle array in the delivery of these electronic pulses, which obviously will control humans. Okay? I mean, that's a no-brainer. That's not hard to figure out at all. So let's go to a definition that Kathleen read in the last live stream about electroceuticals and medicine, the brave new future. This comes to us from ScienceDirect.com, and it's just a brief abstract, and I'll just read this very quickly. Electroceuticals are a new category of therapeutic agents which act by targeting the neural circuits of organs. Now, don't be misled by the word neural. We often think of neurons when we hear the word neural, but it's not just the neural pathways, the neurons of the brain itself. We're talking about the nerve. That's what neural is referring to. All of the nerve pathways within the body, all of the circuits. The therapy involves mapping the neural circuitry and delivering neural impulses to these specific targets. The impulse is administered via an implantable device. In cardiology, besides a pacemaker, defibrillation and resynchronization applications, it could have usefulness in heart failure, atrial fibrillation, coronary artery disease, myocarditis, resistant hypertension, atrial and ventricular tachyarrhythmias, pulseless electrical activity, and refractory angina. That refractory means difficult or impossible to resolve heart pain. Angina is heart pain. It's like a muscle cramp. That's what angina is like with the heart. Refractory means that it cannot be broken, it cannot be interrupted, it's a continuous pain. Okay? So here they're just saying in their introduction, currently drugs rule the roost. Whatever cannot be treated by drugs is treated by interventions or surgery. Technically, all organs and functions are regulated through brain and nervous system circuits of neurons communicating through neural impulses. Even the endocrine system is under control of the central nervous system by a complex array of feedback mechanisms. Furthermore, most drugs affect by either acting on final receptors, which are neural, or endocrine mechanisms. But all known drugs and, of course, surgeries and non-surgical interventions have definite side effects because their action cannot be exactly localized to the defective part or organ. Okay, so that's really the essence of why electroceuticals are such a big deal, is that it's like I said yesterday when I was referring to the president utilizing a scalpel for targeted surgery with regard to the demonstrations. Here we're talking about electrical signals that are, rather than a scalpel or a drug, they are specifically targeting areas within the body, okay? So that the body can self-repair, can self-regulate, can, as with the discussion of hormones, to be able to release appropriate amounts in properly defined time scales. Hormones. The hormones in the body really are the regulatory mechanism of most of the functions in the body. So to be able to electrically stimulate and control the release of hormones really is at the heart, not to place a pun on it, but at the heart of being able to help the body with its built-in compensatory mechanisms to self-resolve its problems, rather than the side effects of not only surgical interventions, but most drugs have side effects and they have what are known as contraindications, where you should not be mixing dissimilar pharmacological agents. Okay, so you have contraindications where you don't want to be using drugs together because of the compounding negative effect that is a result of contraindicated drugs. Okay? All right. Now, allied with this discussion, in concert with this, I want to share with you something that just came out today from futurism.com. Engineered human cells could propel drugs through the body. So this is moving away from a discussion of electroceuticals to continuing to deliver pharmacological agents, but in very specific ways and mechanisms and targets within the body by using platelets. Okay? Recently, several research teams have proposed injecting medical patients with nanobots that could transport medicine throughout their bodies. But one group has a simpler idea. Engineer cells already present in the bloodstream to carry the drugs instead. And we've talked about nanoparticles and nanobots and nanoengineering, so I thought this would be an interesting side note, moving away from nanobots. Scientists from the University of California, San Diego, and the University of Science and Technology in Beijing found a way to engineer platelets, the thin, flat cells that form clots and stop you from bleeding, such that they can propel themselves throughout the body. Because platelets can already shuttle compounds like serotonin and epinephrine through the bloodstream, the scientists hope they'll be able to deliver medicine as well. So I won't go into the whole article here, but I just wanted to interject that just to show, that there are multiple avenues being studied for the delivery of drugs beyond just a syringe. And certainly microneedle arrays, again, factor into this, okay? So let's move along. I've got a lot of things to cover, so I'm kind of just giving you the highlights. These are things that you can look at for yourself later on if you like, if you're taking notes, or you can listen to this later on. I sent you a couple of links with the live stream link. This article on electroceuticals and microneedle arrays is actually a scholarly paper. The link that I sent to you, it's a PDF. When you click on the link, it'll automatically download the PDF for you. And the title of it is Insertion and Chronic Performance of Ultrafine Neural Electrode Arrays in Vivo. That means in the body. So let's just briefly take a look at this PDF, because this is a smoking gun. Okay, this is, for all intents and purposes, this is a smoking gun that is connecting the discussion of electroceuticals to the microneedle array. This is authored by Frederick Sessens, and comes to us by way of Presentation Tales 2019. Neurostimulation, respected family of therapies. Deep brain stimulation, DBS. Remember we talked about Neuralink and the neural lace from Elon Musk, okay? Deep brain stimulation, the brain-computer interface. This is very much in that same vein of thinking. Deep brain stimulation. This is where the Utah array, this is where that metal microneedle array that I showed you, the Utah array, comes in to application. Deep brain stimulation, the symptoms of Parkinson's disease, tremors, experimental for addiction and anorexia and other things. This is where they're actually placing into the skin of the skull, not into the bone, but into the skin, those microneedles, and they're stimulating the brain with electrical impulses. Excuse me, my voice seems to be going away. Cochlear implants, those are for hearing impairment, okay? It's to stimulate the auditory nerves. Rush Limbaugh for years has had a cochlear implant. Nerve stimulation in the inner ear for helping the profoundly deaf. And for pain relief, these can be used. So if you've ever seen a patient with a box attached to typically the top of the head in a laboratory, that's the Utah array, and that's what we're talking about here when we talk about deep brain stimulation. Okay? As you go down through this, it's giving the background to this whole idea of using microneedle arrays to stimulate the nervous system. There's no reason to believe otherwise when it comes to the discussion of the microneedle array vaccine patch, that through 5G, the wireless system of not just deep brain, but the neurological system itself coming under control through 5G Wi-Fi by way of these electrode arrays. All the technology is here. All of it exists already today. Okay? You don't have to get excited. You don't have to hype it up. Don't have to say the world's coming to an end or any of that kind of nonsense. We're just delivering the facts. Okay? Okay. Now, associated with our discussion of GSK and the Electroceuticals and Mr. Slaoui, Seth Slaoui, being head now of the warp speed operation for the vaccine, we have a company that is tied into that is a partner with Google and its Alphabet parent name company, and this is Galvani Bio Electronics, Galvani, Galvani Bio Electronics, established in November of 2016. And from their website here at galvani.bio, they say they're dedicated to the development of bioelectronic medicines, a new class of medicines consisting of miniaturized implanted devices. Formed through a partnership between global healthcare company GSK and leading technology company Verily Life Sciences, Galvani Bioelectronics combines the complementary expertise of its parent companies to enable the research, development, and commercialization of bioelectronic therapies. Bioelectronic, that again is electroceuticals. Bioelectronic medicine is an emerging scientific field aiming to use tiny implantable devices to change precise electrical signals in nerves to treat a range of debilitating chronic diseases. Okay, so they'll go on and they'll talk about all of their benevolent uses and their applications. But you have to look at who's behind all of these guys. Certainly Google, the Alphabet company, is no friend of the average human. They're all about the beast system. They're all about controlling humanity. They're all about connecting humanity to computers and to artificial intelligence. So none of this is going to be benevolent in the final analysis. But I encourage you to go to galvani.bio and just take a look at their landing page. Look at their graphics. Let me see if I can post that into, let's see what happens here. Might be able to get this into our stream. I don't think I'll be violating anybody's community standards at YouTube by doing this. Give me just a second. Kind of doing things on a low-key basis tonight, not trying to get too hyped up and excited about this. You know, we know all this is going on and that it's coming and it's here and all those good things. So, you know, it's just kind of like, okay, let's see if this will play. No. Go to the site and watch their animated GIF here. It's very interesting. This artwork here is very similar to my model of the universe, the 600-cell tetrahedron. If you watch that play out, it appears to be forming a 600-cell tetrahedron. Okay, it's a representation of a neural network. I'll give them that. Okay, but it's fascinating how these little things kind of just pop up. These connections, these things that look so familiar to us. It's an interesting animated GIF. Galvani Bio Electronics. Go to their website. Anyway, the things that amuse me. Okay. So this is from The Guardian back in 2016, talking about Google, which is Alphabet, and GSK, forming a venture to develop bioelectronic medicines. Britain's largest drug company, and Verily Life Sciences, a division of Alphabet. Okay, Verily Life Sciences is a division of Alphabet, have teamed up to tackle chronic conditions. This is 2016. This is coming from theguardian.com. GlaxoSmithKline has teamed up with Google's parent company Alphabet to develop miniature electronic implants for the treatment of asthma, diabetes, and other chronic conditions. Sure they are. Okay? GSK, remember, Moussaoui, he used to be the head of their vaccine development program at GSK, okay? And now he is involved in venture capital. GSK will own 55% of Galvani Bio Electronics, and Verily, which is Alphabet, will hold 45%. And I would say right in the middle of all of that, okay, is Mr. Moussaoui. Galvani will be based on GSK's Global Research and Development Center at Stevenage, Hertfordshire, just north of London, and will have a second research hub at Verily's base in San Francisco. The companies will combine their existing intellectual property rights and invest up to £540 million over 7 years if the collaboration meets certain goals. GSK has been working on bioelectronic medicine since 2012 in a push to develop new patentable treatments as its Advair respiratory treatment faces competition from generic versions. It has invested $50 million in a venture capital fund for bioelectronics and provided funding for scientists outside the company working in the field. Okay, so we're seeing venture capital coming from GSK, which is where Moussaoui came from. Okay, no wonder he's a partner. Again, the company, venture capital company's name is MedicXi, MEDICXI. That's who's right in the middle of what I'm describing to you right now. Bioelectronic remedies attach battery-powered implants the size of a grain of rice or smaller to individual nerves to correct faulty electrical signals between the nervous system and the body's organs. Now remember, this is 2016 technology. We're now dealing with the applications of nanotechnology. This is way below the size of a grain of rice. Okay, we're talking nanotechnology in terms of those cuffs wrapping around nerve bundles. You can appreciate that nerves are very small, okay? So they go on to talk about all the, diseases and ailments and deformities that they're going to be applying this to. But this is all about controlling humans. The whole thing is about controlling us. So why was Moussaoui picked? Besides his background, his pedigree, his connections, and all of that, I would say that it is because they're all working towards the same agenda, and that's to usher in the Antichrist. They're building the infrastructure. They already have it in place, in fact. I don't really need to say building anymore. The infrastructure is already here. The identity of the Antichrist can be made known to the world at any time now, as far as I'm concerned. It's imminent. Just do the 180 on the doctrine of imminence of the rapture, and you have the imminence of the revealing of the identity of the Antichrist. It's that imminent, okay? That happens after the rapture, okay? This comes to us from Forbes.com, and this is from May 24th of 2020. New research shows electroceutical fabric eradicates coronavirus infectivity. That's a heck of a word. Infectivity on contact. All right, so here we go. We're coming back to COVID-19. We're looking at the warp speed vaccine program. We're looking at electroceutical fabrics. Okay, so this is breaking news. In the fight against COVID-19, protective personal equipment has played a central and critical role for the safety of healthcare workers. However, the virus can attach to the surface of personal protective equipment, where it may continue to be infectious for an extended period of time. There's a risk that a person removing their face mask could touch viral particles latched onto the outside and further spread the virus. A preprint paper published recently by scientists from Indiana University suggests a fabric which eradicates the infectivity of coronaviruses on contact by generating an electric field could be the answer to the problem. Last month, a team of researchers determined a hybrid combination of 1 layer of cotton and 2 layers of chiffon is the most effective fabric for a face mask. They noted the high efficiency of the combination is likely due to the combined effect of mechanical and electrostatic filtration of infective particles. The new study from IU further explores the potential of electrostatic forces to act against COVID-19. The research is part of a still growing field of medical devices known as Electroceuticals, a fusion of the word electrostatic and pharmaceuticals. Electroceuticals use weak electric fields, not harmful to humans, to treat a variety of conditions. Pacemakers, which are used to treat arrhythmias, are one common example. Shandon Sen, the paper's lead author and director of the Indiana Center for Regenerative Medicine and Engineering, previously worked on developing the current generating fabric for antimicrobial applications. Bioelectric technology company Vomeris Incorporated currently commercializes the electroceutical fabric for use as a pathogen-killing wound dressing. And I won't read all of that detail, but I think that's fantastic. I would like to have had that as a paramedic for dressing the wounds of my patients. Because essentially it kills off the bacteria that ordinarily would cause an infection to a wound. So I applaud this. This is a great innovation. I think it's great. So there's always the pro and there's always the con. I kind of wanted to give you a little bit of the positive with that. Now, here is something you've heard me talk about for years, and that's graphene. Okay, remember Buckminster fullerenes and buckyballs? C60 carbon arranged like soccer balls. Okay, that's what graphene is. They call it a two-dimensional material. Novel graphene fibers as a new electrical stimulation device. This comes to us from printedelectronicsworld.com, and it is, looking for the date here, but I think, yeah, it came out in February of last year. ARC Center for Electrochemical Science, in collaboration with researchers from the University of Texas at Dallas, have developed novel graphene fibers as a new electrical stimulation device that could replace the use of pharmaceuticals to treat a range of medical conditions. While pharmaceutical drugs have revolutionized the treatment of multiple conditions, there are a number of limitations in terms of side effects and focused delivery, etc., etc., etc. Up until recently, implantable electrodes for electroceuticals were created using standard materials, which resulted in some compatibility issues with soft tissue, therefore limiting the effectiveness of the electrical communication with the nerve. To combat this challenge, the ACES team used the traditional wet spinning fabrication method to manufacture a new style of fiber based on graphene to develop the sutrode, which combines the electrical properties of an electrode with the mechanical properties of a suture. I call it a sutrode. These sutrodes have demonstrated significantly improved electrochemical activity within nerves and are stiff enough to penetrate soft nerve tissue, yet flexible enough to accommodate for micro movements once implanted. Now, you can see this moving in the direction, obviously, of the microneedle array, the patch device being applied, okay, utilizing graphene. So we have talked about graphene in terms of the microneedle arrays delivering quantum dots, but we have focused on the fact that those needles are essentially made of dissolvable materials like sugars, a crystalline material. But you can also make them out of graphene, or you can make them out of metal. Okay? Graphene is a natural conductor. It's used in a lot of electronics and a lot of electrical applications in computing now. So it has very little resistance. Alrighty. So again, this is Technical Thursday. I hope this isn't too dry for everybody. Just kind of giving you the facts tonight. I want to read something too that a patron sent to me a couple of days ago. This comes from idtechx.com. This is regarding 5G. 5G technology, market and forecasts for 2020 through 2030. 5G technology and materials innovations, infrastructure, user equipment, and vertical applications. 5G is considered one of the largest market opportunities in the coming years, with large-scale rollout of infrastructures and rapid adoption of 5G devices and services. 5G will not only accelerate the growth and expansion of telecom, it will also redefine and accelerate industries such as automotive, entertainment, computing, and manufacturing. With high throughput and low latency, 5G is the most promising technique to tackle the high-value areas including 3D robotic control, virtual reality monitoring, and remote medical control. Now I'm going to stop right there because remote medical control is where we have the link back to Electroceuticals, bioelectronics, and the microneedle array of the vaccine patch. Okay, remote medical control through 5G, another smoking gun. Okay, that's what this is all being set up for. I mean, who cares about, virtual reality? But if it's virtual reality monitoring, now we're talking about the sentient world simulation. Okay, all these things that we've talked about for years are coalescing together, and I'm able to insert those components that we've talked about into their descriptions to provide that 180 scenario and reveal the truth to you. Virtual reality monitoring, that's the sentient world simulation. Remote medical control, that's the vaccine patch, microneedle arrays, and electroceuticals, bioelectronics. Okay? Tackle high value areas including 3D robotic control. Well, if you can control a machine, a 3D robotic control system, you can also control a human. Okay? I'll continue. Those are the problems that today's technologies have not addressed yet. However, the enormous investment required to develop 5G and the unclear map of killer applications, that's an interesting word, killer applications for 5G also put the future of 5G to test. This report provides a holistic view of 5G technologies and vertical applications, which are essential to understanding the 5G market opportunity. So they go through talking about the background on 5G, how it operates, and what the dollar potential is in terms of investing in 5G. Anyway, you guys get the point. It's all here. It's all in place. It's all in place. Somebody sent me, a patron sent me a YouTube video. I didn't watch it, but it's regarding the World Economic Forum and the Great Reset. I guess this video just came out, but we presented this to you several live streams ago and then added to it. So we've been talking about this Great Reset and the World Economic Forum talking about it for a couple of weeks now. But the Great Reset itself, we've been talking about for months. It's all coming together. I said to you, you would see more and more articles and YouTube videos regarding the reset. And it's all beginning to unfold right now. Okay? People are catching on to this stuff. Okay? They're paying attention. Okay. Kathleen just sent me a link. Graphene array antenna for 5G applications. 5th generation needs to provide better coverage than the previous generation. However, high frequency and millimeter wave experience penetration loss, propagation loss, and even more loss in energy for long distance. Hence, a graphene array antenna is proposed for high gain to cover a long distance communications, since array antenna enables in providing more directive beams. The investigation is conducted on 3 types of substrates with gain achieved of more than 7 dBi. The gain obtained is good since it's compatible with other studies. Okay, what they're talking about, that was the abstract of a white paper. Graphene array antenna for 5G applications. What they're talking about is using graphene, which, as I said, is highly conductive of electrons specifically, using them as antennas. Now, you remember back a couple of months ago, we talked about the helical array, that's a coil, helical array antenna in the skin, natural antennas in the skin. And I think I still have that graphic here if I can find it. Give me a moment. I think I might have. It takes a moment to scroll through these. Here it is. Remember this graphic? The helical coil looks like a spring. Okay, we're talking down at the nanometer scale. But this is within the skin. Skin acts as an antenna when you're using your cell phone. Here are the skin components. You have a sweat duct, and the duct right next to it is the helical coil. Okay? This is a naturally occurring antenna within the skin, within the dermis. This is the dermal layer. This is the epidermal layer. This is the stratum corneum that's on top of the epidermis. Okay? And through your sweat duct, you have a natural antenna. They take advantage of that. And graphene can be applied in the same manner. Okay? This is the layer of dead skin, the stratum corneum, epidermis, and dermis. And here is the positioning of your sweat ducts. Okay? Naturally occurring antennas. This is what the graphene is being applied to. Graphene coils delivered to the body, embedded in the skin. Microneedle array. It's all here. A graphene array antenna is proposed for high gain to cover a long distance. Now those are antenna arrays that you would find on towers and that sort of thing. But the other application of graphene is to the skin. Okay? That's all part of this electrochemical, electroceutical discussion. Going through my notes here just quickly. Now this is going to be kind of a departure, but one of our patrons sent this to me, and I just want to mention it. I told you we were going to cover quite a few different topics today. The stock market I have another article on the stock market. Let me get to that one first, and then I'll come to this one. Very interesting. Remember we talked about U.S. debt? This comes from CNBC today. Total U.S. debt surges to $55.9 trillion amid big increases in corporate and government borrowing. Debt surged and household net worth tumbled in the first 3 months of the year as the initial impact of the coronavirus pandemic hit, according to the Federal Reserve. The total domestic non-financial debt jumped by 11.7% to $55.9 trillion, the report said. Debt had increased by 3.2% in the previous quarter. So we went from 3.2 increase in debt to 11.7% in the total domestic non-financial debt. At the same time, plunging stock market values took a bite out of the net worth, which fell $7.4 trillion to $110.8 trillion. The Wall Street, however, staged a sharp recovery off its March lows, so much of the loss likely has been made up. Well, let's move to another report. I sent you a link to the debt clock that was sent to me today, so you can see that debt clock. I used that specific website when I was writing Covert Catastrophe, and I was talking about in the book in 2013 the debt reset in Covert Catastrophe. That very debt clock site was the one that I used as an inspiration for that portion of the novel's storyline. Okay? From the Boston Globe today, the Dow Jones Industrial Average dropped more than 1,800 points, nearly 7%, as increases in the coronavirus cases deflated optimism that the economy could recover quickly from its worst crisis in decades. The pullback Thursday comes after the market had been screeching higher for more than 2 months at a pace that many skeptics say was overdone and didn't reflect the dire state of the economy. A day earlier, the Federal Reserve said the road back to recovery would be long. So, remember I said all along, number one, it's a debt-based economy. The whole global economy is debt-based, including the United States. But I said that as we see the coming spike in the coronavirus numbers, okay, we would see an impact on the market. And the blame in the spike right now is being attributed to these riots and demonstrations and looting instances that are going on. And you're going to see more of that blame on that activity as the numbers continue to spike upward on coronavirus. So one of the patrons sent me an interesting observation regarding that number. The Dow fell by not just 1,800, but 1,861 points. 1,861 listed on the Drudge Report today. The patron says, out of curiosity, I did a quick search to see what was happening in America in 1861. And my jaw dropped when I read it. It happens to be the year the Civil War started. The Civil War in the United States began in 1861 after decades of simmering tensions between northern and southern states. This is from history.com. The patron says, in light of the divisions in the country that have been building, with historical statues and national monuments in the crosshairs of destruction, it made the tie-in all the more profound. pray, stay close to the Lord Jesus, and may He keep you in His divine covering. I won't use the name of the patron because I wasn't given permission in the email up front to do that, so I'll withhold the name, but that's fascinating. Civil War, 1861, and the Dow dropped 1861 points. Fascinating. It's all engineered. It's all engineered. Let's go to Joe Biden. I told you we were going to be jumping around to quite a few things here tonight. Joe Biden. This comes from CBS News today. Biden, quote, convinced military will escort Trump from White House if he loses election and doesn't leave. Joe Biden said he believes President Trump will, quote, try to steal the election in November, that he is absolutely convinced the military will escort Mr. Trump out of the White House if he loses the election and doesn't leave. The presumptive Democratic nominee said ensuring a fair vote is his, quote, single greatest concern. Quoting, this president is going to try to steal this election, Biden said Wednesday in an interview on The Daily Show with Trevor Noah. This is the guy who said all mail-in ballots are fraudulent, voting by mail, while he sits behind a desk in the Oval Office and writes his mail-in ballot to vote in the primary. That's Biden talking. So you can go on through all this stuff, you can see. It's amazing. The political bread and circus. We have talked about the Federal Reserve, what is known as the central bank. I'd like to bring another point into that discussion, and this also fits in with our discussion about not only the reset, but Libra. Okay? This comes by way of a patron today. The website is en.as.com. So this is AS. Stimulus check. What is the digital dollar option being discussed by Congress? Now remember, when the first stimulus check was in discussion, there was a lot of talk about issuing a digital wallet, meaning that people could receive their funds through a digital bank account, a direct deposit, if you will. Okay? So what's being discussed here is beyond a digital wallet. They're talking about an actual digital dollar. Remember, problem, reaction, solution, as I read this to you. The United States House Committee will be holding a virtual hearing on financial services about digital dollar, or central banking digital currency, CBDC. As Democrats and Republicans are trying to discuss the terms of a second bill that will, among other measures, will give millions of Americans a second round of stimulus payments. The House Financial Services Committee will discuss how to improve the delivery, as 35 million people are still waiting to receive the first stimulus payment. Morgan Ricks, a professor at Vanderbilt University Law School, in the past has said that a digital dollar should allow consumers to hold central bank accounts. Okay, that means actually having a bank account with the Federal Reserve. That's what a central bank account means. Okay. On the other hand, Chris Giancarlo, former CFTC chair and founder of the Digital Dollar Foundation, has insisted on using a tokenized digital dollar based on blockchain, or distributed ledger technology, DLT. Now remember, right there, where they're talking about a digital dollar based on the blockchain, okay, that's the infrastructure of the beast system, accessed through the mark of the beast. They're setting up for Libra by talking about a digital dollar tied into blockchain. They're setting everybody up for this conversion away from currencies to digital forms of currency. Yeah.
They're asking if you to turn your camera on so they can see you.
Okay. Sorry about that, guys. I didn't realize my camera wasn't on. I still had that silly graphic up, didn't I? Okay, thank you. On Thursday, Congressman Stephen Lynch will oversee a hearing called Inclusive Banking During a Pandemic, using Fed accounts and digital tools to improve delivery of stimulus payments. Problem, reaction, solution. Okay, they've created this whole problem. And in this specific example, they've created the demand for a digital delivery. Okay? They created the COVID crisis. They're trying to bring a solution in terms of stimulus checks, but even that isn't enough. They have to take it to digital delivery of stimulus payments as a solution, because people will applaud it. They'll say, oh, I'll get my money faster. I don't have to wait for it to be mailed to me. See, they're providing these solutions so that people will not question the move to the blockchain, to the cryptocurrency. They won't question it. They'll see it as a solution, but they can't apply the 180 technique to see what it really entails. And that means that once everything is converted to digital, you have to have the mark of the beast in order to access the digital system. So this is how they are implementing through COVID-19, moving everybody to a digital society, including digital banking, digital transactions, and doing away with printed money and minted coins. Even doing away with your debit card. Okay? Problem, reaction, solution. It's all under the guise of the pandemic. Inclusive banking during a pandemic. Inclusive. Remember, I said yesterday, inequality, the psychological operation, creating the mental model of inequality for the non-thinking, for the non-critical thinking people. All they're focused on is inequality. That's their takeaway. That's their mental model. Well, inclusive is part of that solution that is offered to inequality. Inclusive banking. Remember, I've talked about the whole move to ID 2020 and the digital identity was for inclusive banking, for the underbanked, for the underserved, for those lacking a verifiable identity. Inclusive banking during a pandemic. It's the excuse. COVID-19 is the excuse to bring in the digital dollar. Last week, the Digital Dollar Project published its first white paper, and now the United States government needs to consider how to design a digital dollar, because China is already under a digital currency, and this could affect the US dollar's value. Now, let me take that paragraph apart, because long before COVID-19, the Federal Reserve was already talking about a digital dollar project. Okay? So to publish its first white paper is way after the fact. You go back, do a Google search, go back into 2019 when Libra was first discussed in June of 2019, and go back into 2018, and you'll find the digital dollar project with the US Federal Reserve back in 2018 and 2019. So this is not all that breaking news. Okay? We've discussed this for a couple of years, the digital dollar project by the Fed. But I said back then, and I'll say now, that the digital dollar with the Fed will not be implemented it may be implemented in a stopgap for the second stimulus check for that distribution. But very, very quickly, Libra is going to come in. Bear that in mind as I read a little bit more. Giancarlo said in an interview with The Block that the pandemic is advancing key questions about how to deliver public benefits. Okay, that's Social Security, that's food stamps, if you will, unemployment checks. Okay, we have rampant unemployment. Was 47 million, I think, was the number, the jobs numbers that just came out. I think I've got an article for that, but 407 million or somewhere in that area. It was over 400 million jobless claims were filed. Those numbers just came out, and that's what tanked the stock market 1861 points on Thursday, was the jobless numbers. Okay. The pandemic is advancing key questions about how to deliver public benefits more effectively, and it is known that one of the bills drafted from the House Democrats has a digital dollar proposal. Both Ricks and Giancarlo will be joined, and he says their Electronics Association going on with something else there. But here's the point. They're using COVID-19 as the excuse to shift everything to digital dollars. The Federal Reserve will be the holder of those digital dollars and the distributor of those digital dollars. Again, that scenario that I have painted for you for a long time now is that the Federal Reserve will be the one responsible for throwing the switch of the debt reset, and that throwing of the switch is the collapse of the US dollar. Converting to a digital dollar will follow on the heels of the debt reset, but it won't be called a digital dollar by the Federal Reserve. It will be Libra, because the central banks of nearly every country on the planet has a central bank. All of the central banks, including the US Federal Reserve Central Bank, are all players in Libra. They're just calling it a Fed coin. That's what they called it back in 2018 and 2019. They called it the Fed coin. That's just a bridge. That's a stopgap. That's just a leap towards Libra. It will be Libra, despite what they're not saying. They're not calling it the digital coin, the Fed coin, and they're not calling it Libra, because they don't want to let the cat out of the bag yet. They want people to buy into the notion that it's better to do away with currencies and go to digital currencies, cryptocurrencies. And people will applaud it because there's, as I said, they're going to get their stimulus check, they're going to get their unemployment check, they're going to get their Social Security through a digital means. Okay? Just to make it more palatable, make it more acceptable for those that aren't thinking. They just blindly accept it. And they'll do the same thing when the scenario of the offering of the mark of the beast to access all of this, they'll just say, yeah, why not? That's the way things are. I'll take the mark. They'll make it convenient. Remember, all of this is about convenience. Making things so difficult that you will accept the convenient solution. Make it difficult, make it inconvenient, then offer. It's a variation of the Hegelian dialectic. This is the business model of Amazon, who their model is to sell the world everything. They've built their business on convenience, haven't they? But first you have to make things inconvenient. Well, to the extreme, now we have the quarantine, which has made things inconvenient. And what's the solution? To make it convenient again in the context of a quarantine. Online buying and selling. eBay, I heard their numbers a few days ago. I think they had something like a 15% increase since the quarantine was put in place. 15% increase in business on eBay. I don't even know what the numbers are for Amazon, but I'm sure that it skyrocketed. I should look at that. But that's a given. Walmart's numbers are up huge. Because it's convenient. But it's also, in a quarantine, it's a necessity. But this is, again, building mental models psychologically to make things acceptable, make it palatable. Make it palatable that you will say, yeah, it really is more inconvenient to just order it online, putting your local mom and pop shop out of business in the process. To the point where you can no longer buy and sell locally. You can only do it online. And if that's the case, then you have to have access to that system. Setting up the mark of the beast. Very easy to see. You guys see it as much as I do. It's very clear. But now it's coalescing and it's moving at warp speed. The parabolic acceleration that I've been warning about for 3 years now is right here in our hands. The president is proclaiming it. Okay? Let's talk about the first president for just a moment. Kathleen shared this with me a couple of days ago, and I'd like to read this pretty much in its entirety to you. George Washington, our first president. This does have to do with infectious diseases. In this case, smallpox. In the early years of the American Revolution, George Washington faced an invisible killer that he had once battled as a teenager. While the earlier fight had threatened only his life, at stake in this confrontation were thousands, including military and civilian alike. The continued viability of Washington's army and the success of the war for independence from Britain. The unseen killer was smallpox, which Washington described in 1777 as a potentially greater threat than the sword of the enemy. Smallpox was typically brought to 18th century America by either English immigrants or recently arrived slaves. Unlike in Europe, however, the majority of the American population had led relatively isolated lives on farms and plantations. Outside of the coastal cities of Boston, Philadelphia, and Charleston, there was little chance of acquiring the disease. For example, there was no smallpox epidemics in the colony of Virginia prior to 1747. In fact, very few Virginians were exposed to smallpox prior to the American Revolution. One of the few Virginians who was exposed was George Washington, who contracted the disease during his only trip away from the American mainland while visiting Barbados in November of 1751. Washington was only 19 years old at the time, and the illness, which lasted nearly a month, left him with only slight scarring. The brush with smallpox, however, did provide Washington with immunity from further attacks of the disease, the benefits of which would not become apparent until many years later. The coming of the American Revolution, however, made the spread of smallpox more widespread. Soldiers arriving from England and Germany frequently brought smallpox to American shores. In addition, recruits from all over North America joined the Continental Army, increasing the scope of the disease. Within days of taking command of the Army at Cambridge, Massachusetts during the summer of 1775, Washington wrote to assure the President of the Continental Congress that he had been particularly attentive to the least symptoms of the smallpox, quarantining anyone suspected of having the disease in a special hospital. Washington further promised that he would continue the utmost vigilance against the most dangerous enemy. By the fall of 1775, Boston, which was under British occupation, suffered from a widespread smallpox epidemic that threatened to spread throughout the ranks of Washington's army. Reports even surfaced that the British deliberately sent infected people out of the city to expand the epidemic into American lines. In response, Washington forbade refugees from Boston to come near the American camp in order to avoid the risk of exposure. After the British left the city in March of 1776, Washington sent in a force of 1,000 smallpox immune American troops to occupy Boston in order to avoid further spread of the disease. Smallpox continued to plague the Continental Army as well as the civilian population. Epidemics broke out in both Boston and Philadelphia in the summer of 1776, and the retreat of an American force sent to take Quebec was blamed on a number of factors, including the high prevalence of smallpox amongst soldiers. While Washington believed wholeheartedly in the efficacy of inoculation, in May of 1776, he ordered that no one in his army be inoculated. Violations of this order would result in severe punishment. The summer campaigns were about to begin, and Washington could not afford to have a large number of his men incapacitated for a month, vulnerable to attack by the British. Washington eventually instituted a system where new recruits would be inoculated with smallpox immediately upon enlistment. As a result, soldiers would contract the milder form of the disease at the same time that they were being outfitted with uniforms and weapons. Soldiers would consequently be completely healed, inoculated, and supplied by the time they left to join the Army. This comes from Mary Thompson, research historian at the Mount Vernon Estate and Gardens. So, interesting. History's fascinating, and from it we can learn our lessons. If we fail to learn from history, we are doomed to repeat our failures and our mistakes. Right? You've heard that many, many times. Okay. Thank you, Kathleen, for recommending that. Okay, Josh, you're sending me papers, abstracts. I cited the full papers on the graphene array applications. Very good, very good. There's the research article. Thank you, Josh. You're a fantastic researcher. I totally appreciate that. Okay, this is great. Yeah, I downloaded it. Yeah, I saw this. This is the one that I downloaded. Very good. And it shows the construction of the arrays and their pattern signal arrays. This is great. So, this is all overlaid into the discussion of microneedle arrays. There's no question in my mind, in Kathleen's mind, and I would think Josh's mind as well, and many of you, that 5G, graphene, quantum dots, microneedle arrays, electroceuticals, biological, medical devices, all play a role in this mark of the beast. And I continue to get requests for that outline for the mark of the beast. And as you know, as patrons and subscribers to Untitled Magazine, we devoted Mary's outline to the June edition of Untitled Magazine. And the June edition is our 3rd anniversary of Untitled Magazine. And as we did last year on the 2nd anniversary, we are making the 3rd anniversary edition, the June edition, available to the general public. No need to subscribe or be a patron. Simply go to anthonypatch.com, go to the home page, right there, front and center, don't even have to scroll down. Right there is the cover of the June edition. Click on that and you can download the electronic version of the magazine and read it at your leisure. It's all about the microneedle array. It's all about out the mark of the beast. The whole outline encompasses 3 years of discussions on technology, but primarily our most recent 3 editions of the magazine. The last 3 months in an outline form, courtesy of one of our patrons, Mary from Sweden, was kind enough to put that together. In addition to that, I mentioned Josh. Josh also contributed an outline, which is available to patrons only. It's an outline of all of the live streams by categories broken out so that it's more easily discernible as to topics of interest to you. Which leads me to a question that has come up several times over the last couple of weeks through emails. New patrons asking pretty much the same question, and that is, how do I explain to my pastor, to my priest, to my teachers, to my family, how do I explain the mark of the beast, given all of the technologies that are coalescing together at this time? How do I get them to understand the technologies that are embedded, that make up the mark of the beast, and how it operates? And that's a difficult question to answer, other than to say the June edition of Untitled magazine is probably the most organized and concise, succinct way that I can offer to you to witness to someone about the mark of the beast as it relates to the technology that's involved. The question often also is, in conjunction with that question in the same emails, has been the question about me. What's my curriculum vitae? What are my credentials? What's my background? Who is this guy that's putting out this information about the mark of the beast? Well, my response has been that it's not about me. It's not about the messenger, it's about the message. If any vetting needs to take place, don't waste your time on me. I've given you my curriculum vitae. I'm a layperson. My wife is a layperson. We're the same as you. We are learning. We are being good Bereans. We're trying to research. We just happen to be reporting. Okay? But we're lay people. I don't have letters after my name, and neither does Kathleen. What we do have is the Holy Spirit, because we are saved through the blood of Jesus Christ. Yes, it changed our DNA. It changes anyone's DNA who follows Christ, who is repentant of their sins, who gives up their life to Jesus Christ. That renewing, that redemption through the blood of Jesus Christ. There's only one way to the Father, and that's the path. And our DNA definitely has been changed by the blood of Jesus Christ that was shed for our sins. That's the redemption, not the Kabbalist version of redemption, which is redemption through technology. Okay? But we are lay people, so don't have people or you yourself spend a lot of time trying to say, well, he's this and he's that and he has this history and this background and this kind of stuff. It's not about the messenger. Don't bother vetting me. I'm nobody. Okay? I've just served the Lord. That's all. Kathleen serves the Lord. That's all. If you're going to spend time vetting sources and material, look at the message. Look at the information. Look at the evidence, as we call it, that we've presented in Entangled Magazine and in the live streams. And in the articles that are in the patrons' archives that we've sent out. Look at our webinars where we've cited sources, okay? It's the information that should be examined. Yes, be a good Berean. Point them to the scriptures. Every live stream starts with one or more scriptures. The magazine uses scriptural references. That's a great place to start. Then go to this secular scientific technology. But I understand people want to focus on the messenger, and I get it. I'm not beating anybody up. I'm just recommending where time and energy should be spent. It's not about us. It's not about who's conveying the message. Okay? All right. Again, kind of a low-key evening. I hope I haven't bored you. I hope this hasn't been too monotone for you. Sometimes the delivery just has to be a little bit more methodical. Okay? I would like to take questions. We have some time remaining. I haven't really even looked at the chat room before the live stream because I was putting things together. I have no idea what you've been talking about while I've been talking. Kathleen's kind of holding down the fort on that. I do want to make, as you're preparing your questions, sort of a programming note about the chat room and about the live streams. We have a lot of new patrons, and we are so blessed and so thankful and welcome every new patron that joins with us. And when you participate in these live streams, especially by joining in the chat room, you've no doubt noted that these are very friendly people. We call this a safe environment. We have sort of unspoken rules of conduct, code of conduct, if you will. We all, without having to print anything out or say really much of anything, pretty much everybody in chat room is polite, kind. Yes, there are disagreeing points of view, but people get along and they have the ability to agree to disagree. Links are shared with, articles and websites and all of those kinds of things. And it's a very enjoyable and friendly environment. And we did that on purpose because, as I said maybe 3 or 4 live streams ago, my experience with YouTube, with comments, like most anybody who puts out content that is at all controversial, the comments are just terrible. All of the positives just get lost in the comments by trolls. And so over 4 years ago, I disabled comments on my YouTube videos. And then about over 3 years ago, we began the Patreon platform. And from the outset, it was our purpose and our goal to have a chat room that was devoid of the behavior that we experienced on the YouTube comments. And only on rare occasion have we had to ban someone from the chat room. And on those rare occasions, what we would ask, Kathleen and myself, what we would ask of you as a patron is that you not share the link to the live streams while we're about to broadcast, to share the link that I send about 30 minutes prior to airtime, that you not share the link publicly. Because the YouTube link, I'm not talking about, Twitch, which goes out public all the time, but the YouTube link allows someone who has that link to participate in the chat room. And if someone has violated our community standards, to borrow from YouTube, if you will, has violated our code of conduct, and we have provided ample opportunities to change the behavior prior to banning someone from chat. When it does come to the point where we've had to ban someone, we would impose upon you and ask you to not share the link with someone who has been banned from chat, because they've been given plenty of opportunity to be a nice person. And when they choose to misbehave, the consequences are that they are then banned. And so it only hurts other people to share the link. Okay? So I don't want to, belabor the point. I think you get my drift here. Kathleen enjoys the fellowship and the friendship that we have with you in the chat room and through the emails. And this has been a tremendous blessing to us personally to be involved with all of you. Okay? So we don't focus on the negative. We focus on the positive. We focus on all of the wonderful things that you say to us in the chat room, that you say to us by way of emails and posting comments and Patreon. That's what we focus on. And we try to share that positive with you as well. Despite the news, despite the articles and the technology that is, that is negative, we try to focus on the positive, and that's the Lord and the imminent return of the Lord. And all of this points to that. All this coalescing points to the imminent return of Jesus Christ. And that's where our joy is derived from. That's the source of our joy. And that's what we choose to share with you. Okay? So let me take your questions. And Kathleen, I'm sure, will alert me if I'm missing some of them. Let me get this up where I can see it a little better. Eventually I'll have this office set up more ergonomically appropriate. Okay, let's see. Let me scroll up here and see if I can spot any questions. Okay. Well, thank you guys. I'm glad you're all here. I'm glad you're not bored. I'm glad you enjoy being here. We should have frequent flyer mileage for you guys on Patch Airlines, because you guys are all frequent flyers in here, and it's wonderful. Thank you. Thank you for your nice comments in the chat room. Okay. So I'm going to scroll all the way to the bottom, see if there's any questions being posted. Moment of Truth, that looks like a new name to me. So glad I'm here, learned a lot tonight. Great. Welcome, Moment of Truth. Josh is asking me, did you buy a, what is that word? F-E-I-J-O-A. What is that, Josh? Whatever it is, I didn't buy it. I don't know what that is. I don't know. Put it in English for me. Let's see. I was asking how it was that Libra was the one organization that I named as having the digital currency deal, as had seen a list of 7 to 8 companies vying for the contract. It's Concordia. Maryland. Concordia is who is principally behind Libra. It's not Facebook. That's what the media. Oh, you told me to buy a tree, Josh is saying. No, I didn't buy a tree. Send me an email. Explain to me. Explain to me by email, Josh. and what that tree is and why I should buy it. I'm sorry, I'm just blanking out on it, okay? I'm sure you already told me before, but I'm old, okay? So tell me what tree to buy. Hopefully it will thrive in our environment here. We're pretty far north. But we have great soil. We have the best planting soil in the United States where we live. Okay? Yeah, explain. All right, Josh, you head off. You take off. Just send me an email somewhere. Anyway, guys, I'm glad no one is fearful and no one is discouraged by all the stuff that we bring in here. All of this is just, again, pointing to the nearness, the imminence of the return of Jesus Christ. It's almost like you want to applaud what's going on, while at the same time you want to make it as difficult, as hard on Satan and his minions. I said this last night. Be an obstacle. Pray against all of this stuff. Make it hard on these idiots. Okay? Even the humans. Jeff says, unlike Oregon's thick clay. Yeah, I lived in Portland, Oregon for 20 years, and yeah, it is. It's clay. It is tough. All right. Do you think shielding RF radio frequencies is going to be the next best product, wallpaper to shield 5G? Mr. Wilson's saying, well, if you wanted to put up shielding as wallpaper in your home, yes, that would, but it would make it tough for you to run your computer if your computer is dependent on a 5G signal, because if you have 2G, which is the more common, it will also block 2G unless you're running a hard cable. If you're running Ethernet, an Ethernet cable, and you have your Wi-Fi router placed outside the room that is shielded, you know, you're almost making a room into as a Faraday cage, is what you're describing, Mr. Wilson. You could do that. You could have a room that's isolated from radio frequencies with just foil, aluminum foil, you know, wrap it around the head, all that silly stuff. But you can use aluminum foil, lead foil if you want, or a couple of sheets of plywood, extra sheets of plywood or sheetrock on the wall. That will defeat 5G. 2G, 3G, 4G will penetrate, but if you have a couple of layers of plywood up or sheetrock, it will make it difficult for even 4G to penetrate. But you put your Wi-Fi router outside that room and run into the room an Ethernet cable to run your computer, then you have the best of both worlds. Okay? How can we best reach the people around us? Terry is asking. Well, it's a pretty blanket question. How can we best reach people? I think try to identify what is their greatest concern. What's their greatest need? And see if you can address that for them. You want to do it prayerfully. You want to do it from a scriptural standpoint. You're not having to quote scripture, but just from your knowledge of scripture, understanding the precepts, understanding the way that Jesus taught and what he taught is a good way to reach people. Reach people the way that Christ did. He was speaking to people who predominantly were illiterate. They weren't educated people, so he taught in stories, in parables. He taught in scenarios. And that's a way to reach even people today, is through examples, story examples, scenario examples. But find out what's their greatest concern and see if you can address that, is what I'd recommend for reaching people. Okay? Well, thank you, Diane. Thank you, Diane. I appreciate your comment. Thank you. Let's see. Rudolph's question. What's the main reason you believe that Libra will be the one world cryptocurrency? Well, in a nutshell, if you compare Libra to all other cryptocurrencies, Libra is the only one that is designed from the beginning for transactions. All other cryptocurrencies are really designed for speculative purposes, speculative investment in air quotes. They're not designed for transactions. To a limited degree, there are transactions that are taking place with Bitcoin and Ethereum and others, but they really are not designed to go to your neighborhood store and conduct business. Libra is. And this is why there are so many banking institutions and so many large corporations that are behind Libra that are actual members, association members, founding members of Libra, because it's designed for their business transactions. The people that are behind Libra, that make up the organization Concordia, are the Logothetes, which reaches back to the Byzantine period, in which the Logothetes as a group were the fiscal managers, the administrators of the treasuries for a given kingdom or a given government, and they received 12% royalties, transaction fees, for everything that they handled for the benefit of the king. 12% transaction fees. Now you carry that forward into Libra being designed for transactions. Those founding members in the Libra Association will receive those transaction fees, just as it occurred in the Byzantine period. All other cryptocurrencies will be rendered null and void, and all sovereign currencies likewise will be null and void following the Great Reset. Okay? Oh, loyalty, you fell asleep. Yeah, that's because I was monotone tonight and droning on like an airborne drone instead of an airliner. Sorry about that, loyalty. But you can listen to it over. You'll listen, go to the archives on Patreon and you'll be able to listen to it again. All right. All righty. Any other, thank you, Kathleen. Any other questions before we wrap it up for the evening? Wrap it up, that old song. Wrap it up. All right. So, Sunday, Lord willing, Kathleen and I will be back together. I'm not sure what we're going to talk about on Sunday, so I can't really give you a lead-in to that, but probably we will go a little deeper into electroceuticals. Probably. I want to look at the players, their tie-ins to one another and their financials and that kind of thing. So maybe we'll do that on Sunday. But you know, there's so much unfolding, so much happening that there'll be plenty. There'll be plenty to talk about. I do want to just make another clarification before we leave this for this evening. I want to just make it abundantly clear that I am not a racist. Abundantly clear that I am not saying that the line in the sand has been crossed because an affluent area like Walnut Creek suffered looting, and that now, because of that, the president needs to bring in surgical actions, needs to put a stop to what's going on. But you know, the president said today regarding Seattle, Seattle lost, I think it was the East Precinct building, to the rioters. The mayor, a Democrat, not that that really matters, told the police to stand down and to abandon their precinct building. Left it unlocked, and it was occupied by the rioters, the demonstrators. One of our patrons lives only a couple of miles from that precinct building and has been keeping me up to date on what's going on. But President Trump said to the mayor and to the governor governor who claimed when he was interviewed he had no knowledge of this occurrence. The president said that you either stop this or I will stop it. So I'm bringing that up because of what I said last night. It has nothing to do with affluent area versus a lesser affluent area. It has nothing to do with race, creed, or color, what I said yesterday. It has everything to do with the fact that the police officers on the scene in full riot gear were told to stand down and stand by on the perimeter and observe what was going on, the active looting, and to do nothing to intervene. Even to the point of a young girl who was shot in a drive-by shooting. Fortunately, she was lightly wounded and was tended to by a Walnut Creek police officer, as I said. But the point here is, when you have police officers, I don't care if it's in an affluent area or in a lesser affluent area, and I don't care what the racial or ethnic makeup are. We were talking about ethnos last night. It doesn't matter what the ethnicity makeup is, the percentages. It has nothing to do with it. The red line that was crossed, the line in the sand that was crossed, wasn't the fact that it was in an affluent area. It was the fact that the police officers in that area were told to stand down. Okay? I thought about that today, and I really thought I need to make this abundantly clear. Again, I was never a civilian police officer, but I was for 3 years in the U.S. Army, a military policeman. I understand something about law enforcement, and with all my years in Oakland as a paramedic, obviously I worked with the police department and was right in there in the crime scenes, including when Rodney King, the Rodney King riots in LA, Oakland had its sympathy riots, and we were right in there in the thick of it. And there have been plenty of demonstrations and smaller scale riots in Oakland that I've been involved in as a paramedic. I was involved in the natural disaster, the Loma Prieta earthquake, the Oakland Hills firestorm. Okay, so I've been there for some of the notable events that have happened there. So for me to see police officers with their hands tied for political reasons is crossing the line in the sand for me. I don't hold the police officers accountable for that. I hold their superiors who are taking orders all the way up the chain of command, and the buck stops with the president. And that's why I said that the president needs to put a stop to this anarchy. If it has become so political that the local politicians will not allow the officers to serve and protect, they are sworn to uphold the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. Okay? And they're not being allowed to do that. They're not being authorized to do that. And that's where the line in the sand was crossed. Okay? The president put out a warning to the mayor of Seattle. Now, if this continues in other areas and it moves into, as I said last night, the farming communities and their threats of burning down barns and houses and killing livestock, if this continues, because they're trying to send a message to, quote, white America. This isn't me being a racist. I'm reporting their statements as to their agenda. Okay? It could be a group saying against non-whites, saying those things. And I would object just the same way. The president needs to stop this. He took an oath of office to protect the country. The number one function of government is defense of the citizenry. That's both domestically and foreign defense, protection. That's what government in its primary function is there for, is to protect the citizens. Right now our government is failing to protect us. And it has nothing to do with affluence or racial context. Nothing. It has to do with people that are violating the law, violating the Constitution and the Bill of Rights, and they're not being apprehended, arrested, prosecuted, suffering the consequences of their actions by being thrown in jail. And the more that this is allowed, the more that anarchy will continue to spread. And then you have a person like Joe Biden, who says that he's going to bring in the military and drag Donald Trump out of the White House. This is anarchy from within, and it needs to stop. The worst case scenario, I don't even have to tell you what that is. You already know. That's why surgically this needs to be done, and if it means the Insurrection Act that I talked about last night in Posse Comitatus, then so be it. So be it. If it's gotten to that point, and I think the president's statement regarding Seattle's mayor is an indicator that we're getting to that point. Surgical action is going to have to be undertaken to deal with this cancer as a surgeon would deal with cancer. Okay? Thank you all for listening to me last night and tonight. Thank you for all the friendship and fellowship. Thank you for your prayers, and please, if you feel so inclined, we are honored to receive by email your prayer requests, which we keep confidential, and are happy and privileged to pray for you. Thank you. God bless you all, and good night.